I'm going to show you how to fix a Samsung TV with a One Connect box. When I plug in my One Connect box, I do get picture on screen. The HDMI ports, however, do not work. HDMI 1, no signal. Now, this fault is commonly associated with a defective One Connect box, so let's open it up and take a closer look at it. I've already taken the circuit board out of the box as well as removed the heatsink that covers it. One of the things I want us to take a closer look at is that all 4 of the HDMI ports down here link directly to this HDMI processor chip right over here. One of the things we're going to do is check to see if that processor is getting hot. To do that, we're going to be using the UN thermal imager. So we're going to plug in our One Connect box. TV is going to trigger, turn on. Okay, as we can see on screen, we're getting about 52 degrees from the HDMI processor, which is fairly warm, but I think is okay. There are other parts of the board that are much warmer. Let's take a closer look at the back and see if anything on the back is getting hot. I'm seeing a hot spot over here. Let's see what, okay, that is showing us about 114 degrees Celsius. That is 117, that is much too warm. So that is the first thing we're going to be replacing and removing and seeing if that clears up any of our issues.
Using the multimeter in continuity mode,
when we have a short, we get a beep. Realistically, anything below 50 ohms will give us a beep. And the chip over here is the one that was getting very hot. So let's check a couple of the capacitors next to it. We're getting about 8 ohms. What about this one? About 10 ohms, 9 ohms. Let's check this one. This chip is shorted and needs to be replaced. And for this one, we're going to be using our hot air. Oh, there we go. And as always, while the board is hot, I'm going to do a little desolder cleanup. All right, and we are back in continuity mode. Let's take another look. Okay, we are still getting a short. However, something different. Switch just to resistance to get rid of the beep. So something that we can notice here is that we're getting 38 ohms now instead of 10. Now let's take a closer look at the HDMI processor here.
now the capacitors we're going to want to check are on the back side.
And the chip is in this area over here. Yep, we're getting that 35.8 ohms. Same 37, 38 ohms.
Now I actually do think that that reading is normal for these capacitors, but because we are having an HDMI failure, we're going to go ahead and replace that HDMI processor anyways. To make the removal process easier, I'm starting by adding some solder to all 4 sides and then adding some flux. Now we're going to go ahead and hit it with some hot air. And I'm also going to be using my soldering iron as well to assist, just to make it easier for the removal process. First thing I'm going to do to reattach our smaller IC is tin the outer pins. And I do want to be careful. I don't want to put any solder on the center pad because we're going to be using some solder paste for that. Now to make the joints nice and pretty, we're going to add some flux and clean all that up. And next we're going to add that solder paste to the center pad. I did preheat the center pad a little bit just to make it a little easier for that solder paste to spread. And now we're going to go ahead and use our hot air to reattach the chip. Lastly, I'm going to put a little bit of pressure downwards on the chip to ensure that that bottom ground pad is connecting properly. Now that did cause some of the solder to ooze out the sides, so we'll go ahead and clean that up real quick. Okay, let's do a quick visual inspection. First side's looking pretty good. Our second side, we do have a little solder ball there. Third side, we have a lot of solder balls on that right corner. And our last and fourth side is looking pretty good. So we're going to add a little bit of flux and just touch up those 2 corners that had that extra solder. Quick cleanup.
On this side we have 3 or 4 solder balls, so we got rid of those. And then we have that extra solder ball stuck in here, which we also got rid of. And it looks like all of our joints are really good.
Now to install our replacement HDMI processor, we are going to start by putting some solder paste on that ground pad. But one thing we're going to do differently is we're not going to be pre-tinning the pins on each side of the chip. Those we're going to solder down normally once we've placed the chip on the board. Now this next step is very important, and we need to make sure that this chip is lined up as properly as possible, because if it's ever so slightly offset, it's going to make the soldering experience much more difficult. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. So now we're going to go ahead and just solder down one pin on that top left side. And we're going to try to be very careful. We don't want to move anything. We're going to lock in a second pin on the bottom. And then we're going to lock in just another pin on each side to make sure that the chip can't move. And before we proceed to soldering more, I did notice that this bottom pin on the right side there was bent. So we're going to want to make sure that it is lined up properly, because again, if it is not lined up properly, it could short to the pin next to it. And it's going to be a lot more difficult to repair that after we've soldered down the chip. Alright, now we're going to repeat the same process as that smaller IC. We're going to go ahead and physically press down on the HDMI processor while reheating it with our hot air to ensure that that ground pad solders down correctly. Okay, and that completes our first two sides. We're going to go ahead and do the last two sides off screen.
We're going to go ahead and plug our device back in. And looking at the board, it doesn't look like anything's getting abnormally hot on the front side. Let's take a look at the back. Our IC chip is no longer getting super hot, the one that we replaced, the smaller one. And our main processor is at about 60 Celsius, which is normal. So it doesn't look like anything's getting abnormally hot here. Let's give it a try. Let's see, let's plug in our HDMI and see if it works. Okay, it looks like that is working. I've had the One Connect box running for about an hour or so, and everything's been working properly. All 4 HDMI ports, video and audio are good. If you have a One Connect box you would like to send in, I will have links to our website and contact form in the description down below. Otherwise, if you found the video helpful or useful, make sure to leave us a like, subscribe for more content, and thank you for watching.